I do see somebody who hasn't been here before, and I'm very glad to see you, Anne-Marie, but I introduce you first, and then it's all yours, the floor. Excellent. Also, jetzt kommt die Keynote vom Anfang. Keine Angst, wir machen das nachher, was nachher kam, nicht nochmal. Also die Keynote ist jetzt der Schluss. Und weil die höchst bemerkenswerte Speakerin Englisch spricht von dieser Keynote und sie ja wissen soll, was ich über sie erzähle, erlaube ich mir jetzt auf Englisch zu wechseln und fange jetzt an mit meiner Anmoderation. Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon is 28 years old and she is a very, very nice woman. I'm only saying this so that all of you are not being intimidated by what's coming next. At the age of 10, she could speak 6 languages. At the age of 11, she got her A-levels, comparable to our Matura, 11, in computing. 2 years later, at 13, she received a British scholarship to study mathematics at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. At 17, she started a master's degree program in mathematics and computer science by the University of Oxford. And at 19, that's ridiculous, 9 years ago, she became the youngest ever graduate with a master's degree in this science. Just for a comparison, at the age of 19, I was preoccupied with being terribly worried whether I'd ever pass my A-levels, as mathematics was and still is one very big, very torturing, almost physically painful mystery to me. It is, I'm afraid. Not for Anne-Marie Imafidon, for her math and computer science is a world of wonders and beauty. And she wants especially girls to enter this world to get comfortable and at home in this ever so important world. She wants ever more girls to inhabit the world of STEM, meaning the world of science, technology, engineering and mathematics. In short, STEM. In German it would be MINT. For that reason, she co-founded in 2013 a social enterprise called the STEMettes, an award-winning enterprise with the mission to inspire and support young women into STEM careers. But all this is much better explained by the lady herself, by a woman who is on a mission to make women in tech the norm and not the exception. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, please.
Dankeschön, Dankeschön. Ich spreche nur ein bisschen Deutsch, also jetzt auf Englisch. This is good. Thank you very much for having me. As you heard, I was introduced at the beginning. Unfortunately, there's some fog over London, so I've spent maybe 10 hours traveling to be with you today, which I think probably is the longest time it's taken anybody to be here today, possibly. So I've been asked to speak very quickly about whether women will be our future tech leaders. And as you heard from the introduction, this is something that I'm spending a lot of time working on. This is me when I was slightly younger and had slightly less grey hair on my head. The picture on the left, I'm about 4 years old, and I'm stood outside my parents' house in East London. Have any of you been to East London before? Fantastic place. We had the Olympics there in London a couple of years ago. And from that age, I've always loved understanding how things work and taking them apart and putting them back together. So many of you here will remember what a VCR player is. I don't know what the German translation is for VCR. Video recorder, there we go, sounds very German. And I remember taking apart my father's video recorder in order to understand how it worked and trying to put it back together. So this is something that I've always been interested in, and that's why I then did the A-level in computing. I've always loved maths, loved technology, but loved them for being able to solve problems and be able to help other people. Which is what still drives me today in the job that I do and in the work that I'm doing. But even more so when we talk about the future, it's quite an important thing to understand. So when we say the future, we're talking today about future innovators and under 30s. This is almost the image that some of us have of the future, right? Kind of futuristic looking buildings, flying cars, all kinds of spaceships, maybe fog, not really stopping people's travel plans, possibly teleportation. But we have this image, and it's an interesting one because, to be able to get to this future, what do we need? We need innovation, we need technology, we need all sorts of things to be developed, and we need to apply our science knowledge. But when we think about, I don't know if the clicker is moving along. Technology is fantastic, right? This is the future that we all dreamed of. Can I get to the next slide? Is that okay? Thank you. But when we think about innovation and what it takes, it's this STEM or the MINT are the kind of subjects that come into play, right? So it's things like biology, chemistry, physics, medicine, engineering, maths, and computer science. And it's all of these kind of MINT things coming together and overlapping, right? We've got this kind of bioengineering now that we're working on where we're able to kind of cut DNA strands and edit things. It was just the headlines this morning, actually, that the first children that have been, their DNA has been edited, have been born, and they're living now, right? So we're living in this future, and it's being able to bring all these STEM subjects together, all these MINT subjects together, that's allowing us to create that future. But interestingly, when we look back at what's allowed us to get there, this is the image that we have of the people that are building that future, and the people that have influenced that science, and the people that have created that science. This is a photo that I took in a school very near me. It's actually a girls' secondary school very near me. And this is a display in their science department. Can anyone tell me something interesting about this picture? It's very blurry because I wasn't supposed to take it, but I kind of took it in a rush. Anything interesting about this picture that we notice? It's all dead white guys. Which, interestingly, is the image that we have of this science and of this engineering. And no offense to anybody that's a dead white guy here today. But it's sad, and it's rather misleading, actually, that this is the image we have of the past, and it's something that's now influencing the future of this science and of this innovation. Not always in a good way. Just to kind of counter this image, I've got my next slide, which is of dead white women, because they're just as important in this, in the telling and in our innovation and in our journey. How many of you would say you recognize 3 of these women? Anyone recognize 2 of the women? 2? A couple of you? Anyone recognize just 1 of the women, at least 1 of the women? Sort of. The person that said they recognized 2, can I put you on the spot? Oh. No. Oh, sorry, say that one more time. Yes. Yes, it's Hedy Lamarr and... So Hedy Lamarr was correct. So a round of applause. 1 point for Hedy Lamarr. Who was Austrian. So I know some of you here might have come from Austria today. A couple of you. No, maybe. I've been told it's nearby. Hedy Lamarr was Austrian. She's an Austrian inventor. The image that you see there of her, she looks like she's an actress, or kind of looks very beautiful. It's because she is an actress, so she was also a Hollywood actress. Some of you here may have heard, you may not have heard of Austria, but you may have heard of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. A couple of you. Right, there we go. So Hedy Lamarr was a Hollywood actress who in her spare time was an inventor and a physicist. And she co-invented something called frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, which a couple of you will have heard of, but all of you will have heard of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and that's the technology that underpins it. Who knew out of our own Austria, You know, every time we log on the Wi-Fi, we've got Hedy to thank. Marie Curie was the other name that I heard from here. Of course, Marie Curie, Rosalind Franklin are always the ones that we hark to. So she could have been on this slide. She's not. The lady in the middle is a German lady, Katharina Paula, who invented the modern-day parachute, which, again, some of you may have heard of. Some of you may have used a parachute before, if you're the daredevil type. So you have this lady to thank that you're here tonight and still alive with her innovation. And then the lady on the left-hand side was a French mathematician called Marie-Sophie Germain, who was very instrumental in string theory and quite a lot of elements of kind of pure mathematics. And was actually quite prolific around the kind of 1700s when the Eiffel Tower was going up. At that point, being a woman studying mathematics, even though I studied mathematics at university, it wasn't something that was okay to do. So she did mathematics at university by distance under a male name. She had to assume a male name to be able to participate in the studies. And even more so when they turned out that they knew she was a girl, they said, you know, well done, thank you very much, kind of gave her degree. But when they were putting up the Eiffel Tower, they had lots of names. If any of you have been, you've got names of the kind of engineers and scientists of the day. Those were all her contemporaries, and they thought it wouldn't be proper to have a woman's name around next to those names on the Eiffel Tower, and so decided to actively write her out of the history. So we've got lots of examples of where this story should be told. We should know more about our past, more about that innovation, more about who was there. And so we don't. So I like to kind of share some examples. Of course, you don't have to be dead white and female or dead white and male to have had a contribution. There are also people that are living that, of course, are innovating, which is our present, when we talk about present innovators. So just two examples here on this slide. Again, I'll start on the right. The lady on the right is wearing a helmet. I'll repeat, Helmet auf Deutsch. What's that? Helmet. Helm? Helm. Okay, there we go. The lady on the right is wearing a helm. Can we all see it? No, this is not a trick question. You can see that kind of scarf with the zip around her neck. That's her helmet. That's her helm. It's called a hoofdig. And this is a great innovation by two Swedish ladies. I like to say it solves the problem of helmet hair. But more importantly, it acts like an airbag. So on impact, on collision, the helmet inflates and protects the head. And there's also a chip in the helmet that stores information on your crash and collects data from what does happen that you can then use that and send that to insurers and kind of send that on. So that's one innovation. The lady on the left has something that looks like Robocop, maybe behind her. So this is a traffic robot that she has invented in Kinshasa. It's not a traffic light because they were ignoring that. And it's not a traffic cop because they were bribing the traffic cops. So it's a great solution to make sure we don't have traffic anymore in Kinshasa, out in Congo. So there are lots of examples of women who are innovating, who are alive, different types of people who are innovating, who are alive. But also we have to remember from our past and also from our present that in order to truly innovate and to innovate well, we have to consider different types of people in what we're creating. It's very important that we do that. Two examples here on the slide of where we needed to be inclusive or be diverse in our thoughts when we're innovating in order to have some progression. So on the left-hand side, again, is a picture of me, slightly younger, stood next to someone. If any of you have Siri in English, you may not because English is not your language, but most of you will have heard of Siri. So this is the English voice of Siri. Yeah, my mate John, English voice of Siri. Siri, many of you here will remember, I like to call it ye olde Siri, the early editions of Siri. It was rubbish. Can we agree on that? Yeah, you'd say, Siri, give me directions to Liechtenstein, and it would say, do you want ice cream? And you'd say, this doesn't even sound related. But we've had it for decades, and it's been rubbish for decades, but it's only in the last couple of years that now we have Siri, we have Alexa, we have Google Home, we have all these voice assistants that probably can hear us a little bit too well, right? Because they're listening to almost everything that we're saying, right? But what changed? What in all the decades where we as computer scientists, I did this when I was at university, we as computer scientists have been working on natural language processing, been working on all these algorithms, all this technology for decades. What changed so that now we have these voice assistants everywhere? Pardon? Not just computing power, because computing power was increasing anyway over those decades, right? So it's not necessarily the computing power, it's actually the different types of voices that we used as input. So the data, the breadth of the data that we're training that software on, we increased. We had different types of voices, we had different accents that we also trained it on, which means that now you can put it in pretty much any scenario and it works. There's a great video on YouTube called Two Scots in a Voice-Activated Elevator. That you can go and look up. Siri in England still doesn't understand the Scottish accent. So still work on diversity. I don't know what that would be out here. I'm not quite sure about the Liechtenstein accent. But, we needed to have that in order to have that software take off and that technology take off. On the right-hand side, we have the more engineering invention, airbags and seatbelts, which again, the initial teams of engineers that worked on this worked with averages, worked with the typical person that they thought might be using this new car invention. They built this safety device to strap you in based on your average height, your average weight of the average man. And so early iterations of seatbelts and airbags killed women and children, which was not the point of the seatbelt or the airbag. Right? So sometimes it's even maybe a matter of life and death that we make sure that we're inclusive with what we're creating. And I think the more that we come into the future, the more we have these technologies, the more we have to consider and make sure that we are being inclusive about our innovation and we are making things that work for the many, not just for the few. That we have a wide perspective on what we're creating and we're not just building it because it's a cool thing or building it because we can. And there are so many different inventions, so many different things that we have coming up. On this slide alone, I've got virtual reality there in the top left. Something that we're still figuring out what we need it for. I don't know if anyone else has noticed. We've got the technology, we've invested, we've got it great. The computing power has kind of kept up and given us better VR. But what is VR for? Anybody? We're still figuring that one out. Top right, I've got this great device. For me, so this is called Molly, this device. When you get 5 retweets on a tweet, Molly gives you a sweet. Which is for me, this is a fantastic example of the Internet of Things, which is a great new innovation that we have. It's allowing us to have smart cities, allowing us to do all kinds of things, allowing us to deliver ourselves sweets. I've got a friend that has a house that tweets. So when you open the door, there's a sensor on the door that sends something through to a Twitter account to say the front door has been opened. He lives in a cottage on an island, so he's also connected mouse traps in the ceiling, so that when a mouse is caught, then also a tweet goes out to say a mouse has been caught. So we've got this fantastic technology. We've got robotics down the bottom. And then, of course, driverless cars there on the right-hand side, which, again, we have to remember as we're innovating, as we're building, we don't want to build that seatbelt that kills people inadvertently. We don't want to build that Siri that it takes us decades to be able to have realize its true market value. We want to be inclusive from the beginning. And so, and it's also very important actually that we are inclusive from the beginning and we are open about how we think. So this is something that I'm doing a lot of work with aside from STEMETS actually in the UK, which is looking at the future of work. I'm doing this UK and globally now as well, the future of work. What happens? How do we ensure that our policies are protecting the people that are working with this technology? There's the recent example of the artificial intelligence that is being used by managers to track how long workers are spending at their desks and how efficient that they are in doing what they're doing. I know we've got Workers' Council in Germany. I don't know if there's Workers' Council in Liechtenstein to kind of look after this, but we've got to make sure as we build the technology that we're regulating it correctly. Of course, Mark Zuckerberg didn't turn up today as well for the deposition that we had there in the UK. Maybe the fog got in his way, but it's important for us to make sure that we're considering this and we're thinking about the future properly as we're building. But it's also important to make sure that we do have women be part of this. So this is some statistics, and if you look for them, there's countless examples of where economically you do better when you have good representation, when you have women involved. This is stats just on boards. So female-friendly companies outperformed competition by 53%. You get a 42% higher return on sales, and you get 66% more successful with your initial profit on your investment. So it's quite important for us to make sure that we've got women as part of our tech leadership, as part of our Mint leadership, as part of our innovation that we're doing, because of the numbers, because of course the numbers talk and numbers are important, but also because we want to be able to innovate correctly. And there are so many things that are getting in the way of this actually happening. If we look at the picture on the left, who sees a princess? Who sees an engineer? Who has no idea what they're looking at? We've got this messed up perception of, what does an engineer, what does this technologist actually look like, right? We go back to that kind of blurry picture, and even in 2018, we're still pushing that, even though we know there are so many different types of people that have innovated. We have all kinds of messages, subliminal messages, and conditioning that goes out. Big Bang Theory, I don't know how many of you have seen that before. When I'm in hotel rooms across Europe, I know it's definitely been translated, so it's definitely kind of being broadcast. But when we look at the stereotypes there, when we look at the social norms that are being projected by that, it's happening, it's impacting, it's changing the way that we see engineers, that we see scientists, that we see people that do maths. Even here down the bottom right, so EE is one of our mobile phone networks in the UK, and this was a product that they were selling just 18 months ago on their website. I'm too pretty to do maths. We have these kinds of things that continually perpetuate that same image that this is not something that girls do. And so it adds to this messed up perception we have of princesses versus engineers. So what I've been doing, what I've been working on for coming up to 6 years now, is trying to change that social norm and edit that perception and the awareness of what is available in Mint for girls and young women in particular. So across this slide, we've got some parts of the program and of the movement. It's 40,000 girls and a couple of boys and counting over those 6 years across the UK, Ireland, and different parts of Europe. It's hackathons that we're doing with girls as young as 5. It's mentoring programs. It's allowing them to innovate. It's running our own tech incubators as well for teenage girls, giving them the funding, giving them the opportunities, giving them Y Combinator type experiences for them to build businesses and build with each other, but also then trying to influence others, trying to influence TV, movies, books, and culture to help change that perception and change what it is. And so we've been doing that with the girls and the young women. So this was our first cohort with the mayor of the city. You can kind of see him proudly. With the ribbon cut in there in the middle. But we've been getting these girls to create and see themselves as STEM leaders in environments that are majority female, but that are incredibly empowering, that mean that when they do go back out into the real world, when they do see Big Bang, when they do see the rest of it, they're almost insulated against it. There's 2 things that we've learnt as we've done it that I wanted to share with you, to take back to your own spheres of influence, your own initiatives or programs you might be involved with. And then a couple of kind of tips for what to do as you're doing business, as you're working with others. Because it's not just about the girls, it's also about the women. It's also about those that work around them. This is something for all of us to be involved in. It's not just about education level. So the first thing is altruism. Often when we talk about innovation, when we talk about technology, we talk about doing things harder, faster, bigger, stronger. And go, fast, rather than talking about the fact that actually technology solves problems. Oh, we go back. Thank you. Rather than talking about the fact that technology solves problems, right? It's not about getting it quicker or faster or smaller. It's about how can you help that person better with better technology? How can you allow that person to be more conscious of the environmental impact of what they're doing? So on this slide, we've got some of the logos of some of the startups that the girls came out of that incubator house with. We had startups like Purchase Mate, which allows you to scan the barcode in the supermarket and see how far that product has traveled and kind of see the carbon load of that product. 3 feet just underneath it was a device for you to put on your shoe if you've got Parkinson's disease, and it reduces the gait freezing as you're walking, because walking with Parkinson's can be difficult. EnviroCrash gamifies walking and going on trails, which allows people to get out into the outdoors. So talking about this kind of technology rather than just the apps that you've built for your apps app is very important when trying to engage different types of people. But for the next slide, just as importantly is the creativity involved in this innovation, which again, when we talk about science and we talk about maths, it's about being a genius, and it's about remembering all the formulae, remembering all the theorems, and all the stuff that I spent all those years at university doing. Whereas actually, when you get out into the real world, it's about creativity and applying that, solving problems with it, but bringing your whole self to being able to solve those problems. So on the left-hand side of this picture, of this slide, I've got May-Britt Moser, who won a Nobel Prize in the last round, not this year. She is wearing a dress that kind of shows the element that they discovered and the things that they were working on. And for me, that's a great image of showing actually that you've got art as well as part of STEM. So in the UK now we have STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts and maths. I don't know where the A would fit into MINT, maybe Minter. Possibly is where we go with it. So it's important to make sure you do that and you're able to bring your whole self. They say with the Nobel Prize, you're much more likely to win a Nobel Prize in the sciences if you've engaged with the arts as part of your upbringing. Which sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? It should be that if you're the best scientist, all you've said since you were born was science, 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 science. Right? Where's there room for art? Whereas it makes you a better scientist if you've got art. So we need to talk about that. But also we all need to work to change perceptions. So I think I've saved you from being an all-male panel today on the roster. But it's important to make sure that we continue to tell the stories of different types of people. There's new pledges that we've got being launched now where, if you're a guy that's invited to an event and it's all dudes on the panel, you say, no, I'm not going to be on this panel. You need to go and find some other types of people. You're not trying hard enough if you've not found anyone that looks slightly different from everybody else on the panel. But also looking at kind of the small things and small changes that we can make. And I'll close actually on this example because I know we're going into a quick Q&A of this person on the left-hand side. So I know just yesterday there's kind of a big thing that happened on Mars for any of you that kind of were watching the news and were following it. The last time they put a mission to Mars, the Rosetta mission, there was a big press reveal again, as we do. We're all obsessed with space. We love space. We love the space race and everything to do with it. This is the person that turned up to do the press and represent the European Space Agency across the television, on national television, international television. This was the person that turned up to talk about us going to Mars. The guy on the left. Who here owns a shirt like that? Who would wear that shirt out of the house? Okay, who's wearing that shirt out of the house to work? Who's worn it out of the house to work on a day that they have to represent work, and there's going to be a camera there, right? They've turned up at the studio. The studio's not said, it's interesting, there's naked people on your shirt. Maybe you don't want to wear that shirt today. Wear a different shirt. So no one's said anything or stopped. So you've got to imagine, what's the workplace like? What is it like working with that person if so many things were allowed to go? Me as a woman, I don't know how much I'd want to sit and work on a project with that kind of person who thinks it's okay to wear that to work. What else are they doing in the environment that's going unchecked? So it's also important for all of us to make sure that we are the change. It's not just something for women to do. It's not just something for young people to do. It's something for all of us to do, to ensure that we've got all different types of leaders, not even just women, different types of leaders that are innovating with us and creating that future so that it works for all of us, not just for a few. So I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Many, many thanks, Anne-Marie, for this lovely keynote. I have to tell you, referring to the guy in the completely undescribable shirt. Actually, one of the ladies in charge of Rosetta is a lovely physicist.
Lady. Yeah, I know.
You know her,
Yeah,
Catherine Altwig?
Yep.
There we go. So there are women in tech already, and believe you me, guys, she's one hell of a lady. So are you. We're running out of time, so let's cut short the Q&A. I just got one question for you. What do you tell a guy, let's innocently presume it's a white male, telling you, why do we need more girls and women in tech? Aren't there enough boys?
Enough boys in technology? There's maybe too many boys in technology.
That's a good answer. I thought you'd kick him.
No.
You'd kick him.
Violence is not the answer. Violence is not the answer. It's 20% is what we have of women working in technology or working in STEM or the MINT across Europe. But it's about 50% is what we have. I know Liechtenstein actually has slightly more boys than women. When I was doing my research today, the female to male ratio, I think Liechtenstein is the highest in the world of boys versus girls born. So maybe here it's slightly okay to be off kilter. There must be
something in the water.
It's got to be something in the water.
Or they have good government.
Maybe, or bad government, who knows? You might want more girls, I don't know.
The government is sitting in the first row,
well, okay.
But go ahead,
They're
be
great.
my guest.
I say it like it is. But it's important. The stats aren't there, they're not correct, they're not balanced. And it's not something that resides on that Y chromosome. We've got these kind of studies. So it's not that it's a girl thing, boy thing. It might be that, the fact that we don't see them in movies, we don't see them on TV, we don't see them anywhere. So you're conditioned to think that maybe it's something that's a boy's thing. But that's what I say. I wouldn't kick him. I'd just say there's probably too many boys there.
And by the way, we've all seen the slide. I mean, we're in Liechtenstein, a home of many, many banks. It translates into money, obviously, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it makes commercial and economic sense. So that's what I say. But people aren't rational. Human beings aren't rational, right? So you have to appeal to hearts and minds, not just straight money. Hey, money does make the world go round, though. So I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. But that's what I'd say to them. It's one of those things that for the sake of all of us, actually, we need to make sure we've got more women and more different types of people building and innovating, because we don't know what will happen next. We don't know what the unintended consequences might be. So far, we've had, elections fixed. We don't know what's the next thing that will go wrong. What's the next unintended consequence that will happen just because we've got too many boys building this technology.
Ladies and gentlemen, a lady on a mission, Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon. Many thanks indeed. Thank you.